Cedar Point is one of, if not the very best amusement park in the United States. It's home to one of the best roller coaster collections in the world. With each new addition, the park manages to wow us all over and over again. But what's next? Today, I'm going to share my thoughts on what I think Cedar Point's next coaster will be and why it will be better than you think. You want to watch until the end of the video because you won't believe what I think it is. To predict the next coaster for Cedar Point, we should look at their current lineup and see if they're missing anything important. We're going to use a list of important things an amusement park should have. I took some of the things on this list from Airtime Thrills Checklist, so be sure to check them out after the video. For a park to be well-rounded, it needs airtime, intensity, speed, and height, as well as a launch coaster, an invert, meaning under the track, a coaster focused on inversions, a spinning coaster, and the Woody. Cedar Point checks off the airtime box with flying colors, especially with Steel Vengeance. Intensity is checked off by Maverick, and Top Thrill Dragster hits the height and speed box. The launch box is checked off by multiple coasters, and they have a B&M invert, so that checks off invert. Their B&M Diving Wing, Valravan, and Gatekeeper check off the inversion box. They don't have a spinning coaster, so there's a first gap in the lineup, and they only have one wooden coaster, which is pretty old. Their two biggest gaps are a spinning coaster and a second wooden coaster. They check many bonus boxes also. They have multiple Intamins and a B&Ms, and they have an RMC, having a solid number of coasters from the industry's lead manufacturers. Now let's look at which manufacturer Cedar Point's parent company, Cedar Fair, works with. Cedar Fair works with RMC and B&M as well as Mach and GCI. They may start working with S&S as they are building a free spin for King's Dominion, but we'll have to wait on that. These are the major coaster manufacturers that Cedar Fair works with. You may have noticed one of the bigger manufacturers in the industry is missing from the list. That's Intamin. Cedar Fair worked with them back many years ago, and after suffering reliability issues with many of Intamin's coasters, they moved to B&M for more reliable models. Many people predict Cedar Point will add a B&M flying coaster next. The flying coaster would be a great addition and would be easy to break records with, but it just doesn't feel like the right addition for them now. The flying models are the most mechanical of all B&Ms and the least reliable, though still very reliable because it's B&M we're talking about. The flying coaster also won't fill any of the gaps in Cedar Point's lineup, and to be honest, do you really think a B&M flying coaster is something that could top Steel Vengeance? I mean, I think we both know the answer to that question. Cedar Point may want to go with a flying coaster, though, as it's a unique experience. But what if there was something better fit for the park? Some people suggested Cedar Point could get a Mach Rise Extreme Spinner. The Extreme Spinner is a newer model and would fill the gap of a spinning coaster in Cedar Point's lineup. If Cedar Point did it right, which they would, it would break records and be a smashing success. It may not top Steel Vengeance, but it could possibly contend. Still though, I think this isn't what Cedar Point will go for as their next coaster. The Cedar Fair chain isn't as focused on spinning coasters as their competitor Six Flags is, and I think it will be another few years before they look to purchase a ride like that. It's definitely an option for Cedar Point's next coaster, but I think there is still a better option. Another coaster many predict Cedar Point will add next is a GCI wooden coaster that maybe even goes upside down. GCI unveiled a new Titan track that can possibly be used to have the coaster go upside down and rival RMC. Cedar Point only has one wooden coaster now, so this is definitely something they could use, but I just don't see it as the right model for the next coaster. Maybe they'll add one later down the line. Don't get me wrong, this would be an awesome ride, and is definitely a possible option. It would fill the gap of a wooden coaster, giving the park their much needed second Woody. However, it will be a little similar to Steel Vengeance and probably not as good. However, what if I told you there was the perfect coaster Cedar Point could add that would fill the same gap but in a better way? Now I know I'm sounding interesting, but bear with me for a moment. What if I told you this coaster would be better than Steel Vengeance? Are you curious yet? What if I also told you this addition would send a blow to one of Cedar Point's biggest competitors? You see where I'm going with this? What if Cedar Point added an Intamin prefabricated wooden coaster? It would be over 200 feet and make it the tallest Woody. It could break several other records if they wanted. It would definitely compete with Steel Vengeance, being that El Toro and Intamin prefab at Six Flags Great Adventure ranks close to Steel Vengeance, and it's 15 years old. If Cedar Point were to add an Intamin prefab, it would likely be the best coaster in the US and even the best in the world. Just think of the airtime it could have. It would fill the gap of a wooden coaster, but take it to the next level. The price isn't too high for their budget either. The only thing is the Cedar Fair chain hasn't worked with Intamin for a while, so they may not want to contract them for Cedar Point. But you never know. Maybe Cedar Fair will decide to work with Intamin for a wooden coaster. Another thing is the ride might be a little similar to Steel Vengeance, but when you have a park with 17 coasters, every new addition will be similar to something. Another plus about adding an Intamin prefab is it would send a blow to one of Cedar Point's biggest rivals, Six Flags Great Adventure. The parks are only about 10 hours away from each other, but anyone that wanted to go to Great Adventure for El Toro would instead go to Cedar Point. Great Adventure and Cedar Point are a lot more competitive than you may think. After Cedar Point broke the height record with Top Thrill Dragster, Great Adventure took it with King Daka. After Cedar Point built Steel Vengeance and RMC, Great Adventure went to get Jersey Devil and RMC. So getting a prefab would punch Great Adventure in their best spot and will make possible for the world's greatest coaster. Sounds like the perfect fit for Cedar Point. Please launch the like button by giving it a little tap. When the button turns blue, you've successfully launched the like button coaster. Anyway, back to the video. So far, I named 4 potential coasters Cedar Point could get. One from B&M, one from Mack Rides, one from GCI, and one from Intamin. If you noticed, I just named the industry's top manufacturers, but I didn't name 2 very large companies. Those are RMC and SNS. I don't see RMC coming again yet, as they just used them for Steel Vengeance, and RMC's T-Rex model isn't available yet. As for SNS, I'm gonna drop a wild card. What if Cedar Point were to build a full 4D coaster like X2 at Cedar Point's rival, Six Flags Magic Mountain? Well, they'd probably do it bigger and better. It would have a chance at becoming the world's best coaster if they did it right. Now, what if they did it with the next generation of that model? I'm talking about the Axis coaster. Yes, a 200 plus foot SNS Axis coaster. It would not only be the first of its kind and break records, it would also be one of the best coasters in the world. It would give Cedar Point a spinning style coaster filling the gap, and it's not so far off knowing that Cedar Point is already working with SNS building a free spin for King's Dominion. It will make for a perfect ride for Cedar Point. I just named 5 possibilities for Cedar Point's next coaster. Now it's time to rank how likely I think each one is. Be sure to stick around to the end of the video, as I will be predicting when I think Cedar Point will get their next coaster. Now for the rankings. I give the GCI Woody a 30% chance of being Cedar Point's next coaster. Well, it would be a great and well needed addition, though it's a little similar to Steel Vengeance, so I think the park will want to wait a little longer for it. I give the Mack Extreme Spinner a 25% chance of happening. Cedar Fair works with Mack, and Cedar Point could definitely use a spinning coaster, but the chain doesn't seem so into spinning coasters yet, and there is only one other One Extreme Spinner in operation so far, so it may be an addition for later down the line. The B&M Flying Coaster, I give it 25% chance. Cedar Fair works well with B&M and installed several of their coasters over the past decade in many of their parks. However, they never installed a flying coaster yet, which makes me wonder if they ever will. Another thing I will add here is we don't yet know how much about the B&M Surf Coaster, but if somehow it's a launched second generation flying coaster, I could definitely see Cedar Point picking that as their next coaster. They would have no problem getting their first of its kind, and since it's a B&M and a unique experience, it will be a perfect option. Next up is the S&S Access Coaster. I'm giving it a 20% chance. Cedar Fair isn't so close with S&S, although they do work together, so it's a possibility, but not such a big one. Last on the list is the Intamin Prefab. Personally, this is what I would pick if I were Cedar Fair, and I don't know why no other enthusiasts mentioned this ever from what I heard, but sadly it's the least likely option. I'm only giving it a 10% chance. Cedar Fair hasn't worked with Intamin in over a decade and doesn't seem like they will go back to them anytime soon. If they do though, this would be a great addition. Now, when do I see Cedar Point building the next coaster? I say either 2022 or 2024. I'm leaning more towards 2022 though. The reason I say 2022 or 2024 and not 2023 is because I think Cedar Point will want to open the next coaster during their 150th anniversary celebration, which was supposed to be in 2020 and 2021 and was now pushed to 2021 and 2022. If Cedar Point already purchased a coaster for 2022, then I think it will be open in 2022. However, if they didn't, they will likely try to rush it for a 2022 opening to open for the special anniversary. If that doesn't work out and the coaster gets pushed past 2022, I say it won't open in 2023 either. Once they miss the 2022 year, there's no reason for them to rush it. That's why I say 2022 or 2024. Do you think Cedar Point will add any of the 5 coasters I mentioned? What do you think of my idea of adding an Intamin Prefab?